So I never thought I was going to make a Doom tribute. Doom's death has easily been the celebrity death that has hit me the hardest. It was so unexpected for me, and I really didn't know how to react to it the first time I heard about it. And at this point, I think pretty much everything has been said about Doom. Everything from chronological history of all of his career, to deep discussions about his character, to just constant discussions about the music in itself. And I think pretty much everything has been done. So what I wanted to do was pretty much give my own general guide into what I believe is the best way to start when it comes to listening to MF Doom. Just because I think in the next coming months, and then probably the next year, there's going to be a lot of new people that are introduced to Doom that have never heard his music before. And usually when it comes to being introduced to Doom, a lot of people will say to start off with Madvillainy, just because it's his most popular album and his best album, which even I can agree with. But don't do that. Madvillainy, despite it being his most popular album, is still at its core one of the most abstract hip-hop experiences you probably will ever have. It is still super experimental, probably his most experimental album ever. They broke so many rules when it came to song structure there. There are like no hooks in this album. It's 22 tracks, despite it only running for like 44 minutes. There's still a lot of songs here. It's just a lot to digest, and it's not at all a good place for you to start off with Doom. Now, I personally think that in general, there are two very good places to start. Number one is Operation Doomsday. Not only because it's his debut album, but with it coming in the late 90s, despite it not being boom bap, it still has that 90s feel to it just because of how raw it sounds. Doom never really succumbed to any type of hip hop trend, but this still does have that 90s vibe mixed into the production, maybe not so much in the vocals, that I think a regular 90s hip hop head could fall in love with, maybe even if it's just for the production. On top of that, it does give you a lot of good insight into MF Doom's life and the character in itself. You get the track Question Mark, which is a very heartwarming tribute to Sub Rock, which is MF Doom's brother, which he unfortunately lost, which was a big part in him disbanding from KMD and hip hop just kind of tossing them to the side. Also, that beat switch is easily one of my favorites ever across any genre. Just incredibly terrific. This whole album, which is entirely produced by Doom, really gives you an insight to how fucking great and underrated as a producer he is. Secondly, you get the track Doomsday, which is probably the perfect first song you should listen to. It has that jazzy production which really became prominent in the early 90s, but also it shows you kind of him reflecting on the 5-year hiatus that he took. He has the line, came back from 5 years lane and stayed the same. It really is the perfect opening track. And also, now that he has passed away, the line that hits the hardest, no question now, is, till I'm back where my brother went, that's what my tomb will say, right above my government, Dumale. You know, that was always a really good line, but I think the day he passed, that line just really fucking hit me hard. But I think it made me feel a little bit better. It almost feels like Doom's at peace with everything that's happening. And Doom has always kind of had a more positive outlook on death. He almost always felt like after Dilla passed, after Sub Rock passed, he was still there with them. But besides those two tracks, you also get introduced to MF Grimm in the track Tick Tick, which is such a mind-blowing flow that you're going to be introduced to here. I don't think anybody but MF Grimm and MF Doom could have probably rapped over this Beatles sample, which I think is off the White Album. Incredible flow here. It will blow your mind. You'll probably have to listen to it 2 or 3 times to fully grasp what the fuck you're listening to. But MF Grimm is one of Doom's lifelong business partners. They kind of had a fallout midway throughout Doom's career because of royalties, but still a very interesting MC that I think doesn't get enough credit for how unique he can rap on a mic. So that's where I would personally start if you're just generally trying to get into MF Doom. But the second starting point, which is actually where I started, was M Food, or what I like to call the Food album. I initially listened to Hoe Cakes, and I was completely mind blown by the production. To me, whenever you're diving into new genre and you like a certain album, that album for some reason automatically becomes one of my favorite albums ever, simply because whenever I'm in the mood to listen to said specific genre, that's the one or one of the few albums that can give me that feel that other albums in other genres can't replicate. For example, when I was first getting into punk, I was a huge fan of the Sex Pistols debut, and that album just kind of seemed to become one of my favorites because I didn't really know that many other punk bands. Now, of course, I got into more punk music and started listening to people like Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, and those initially became bands that I put over the Sex Pistols, but in the beginning, the Sex Pistols were just that for me. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because when I listened to Hoe Cakes, I could not understand how it is that MF Doom made this beat. It was almost like he was starting to create sounds for me. That's why I love an album like Straight Outta Compton or 808s and Heartbreaks, because it seemed like those albums were just creating sounds. Dr. Dre with the synthesizer and Kanye West with the 808 drums. And those albums are just so unique and such a constant playback in my music palette, because when I first listened to them, there was nothing else that replicated what they were creating with those sounds. And that's what I felt with Hoe Cakes. I had no idea how that beat was created. And once I found out that MF Doom made that beat, I just became an instant fan. On top of that, I think this is Doom at his wittiest and most clever point in his career. And the comedic value of Doom is a very important aspect to his music. He portrays a lot of darkness through his clever, witty, funny rhymes, which is what makes listening to him so interesting. Sometimes it's good to have such a witty outlook when it comes to solving problems because you don't want to take everything so seriously. And what Doom did for me was portray all of the hardships in life in a more funny way that allowed me to deal with everything not so seriously and therefore succeed in solving my problems per se. Of course, when you listen to the Mr. Fantastic track, you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. Just rappers snitching on themselves, that was just such a genius track, and it's easily one of the funniest tracks that I've ever heard. But it's also very serious in its subject matter if you actually take it for what it fully is, and that's what gives MF Doom's music just so much value to me. And all of this is tied up into a loose concept about food. There's hella food bars all over this album that he ties into other topics about life. And this is an album that really taught me that when it comes to concept albums, you don't need to have an overtly complex fucking concept like Deltron 3030 or To Pimp a Butterfly to have a good concept album. And I think that's something that fucks up a lot of artists. For example, I think J. Cole's a great artist. He just picks these really difficult concepts that he can't always pull through with, and that's what I think gives the music just not that oomph that it really needs for me to fully enjoy him. If he were just to stick to simpler concepts like the food album, I think his music would multiply tenfold for me, and I would be listening to him way more often. So a really important album in my listening experience that I think would be a great starting point on top of Operation Doomsday. Now, if you're still not sold there, it probably is because you just don't fuck with Doom at all. But there's still one more album that you should at least give a try, and that is Born Like This, which in my opinion is his most underrated album, an album that I think even the biggest Doom stans overlook, and I hope that after his passing, people will look back at this album and really see how underrated and how underappreciated it really is. This is Doom at his darkest, his most evil, and in turn, his delivery, despite it being so gritty, it still sounds the most accessible, at least to me. And I think delivery is something that turns off a lot of people when it comes to Doom. You can watch my undermining MF Doom video below. I say the word delivery like 67 times in that video, but repetition and practice makes perfect. Check out that video if you haven't. But his delivery was just very well thought out. Changing his delivery, which is something that his stands love so much, I think was a very risky move, but I think it paid off. Listen to a track like Rap Ambush, he sounds so hungry late into his career. On top of that, you're getting Madlib production, you're getting J Dilla production. Listen to the first fucking song, and there's like what seems like 5 beat switches, even though I don't think there's really 2 beat switches here, but it sounds like fucking 5. The way Doom changes his cadence and his pace constantly throughout the song is incredible. Really, the only bad moment is Batty Boys. I just can't really get with the subject matter there, despite the beat still being incredible. And also the track That's That. He's rapping over what seems like it's just some strings, some violin strings, but he's still somehow rapping in a way that makes fucking sense. A lot of people will say that he's offbeat here. You can have arguments all day whether he's on beat or offbeat, but it just sounds really fucking good to me, and his rhyme schemes are just insane. And that's one of the things that, you know, when it comes to this type of track, a lot of people will say, well, what is he talking about? What does it mean? And it's because Doom is a lyricist that people are always going to gravitate to the lyrics. But something that I've always said about lyricists is that despite the lyrics being so highlighted, the music behind what lyricists usually pick is really fucking great. And their flows, their voices, their delivery, everything outside of the lyrics and the words in their own sounds really fucking good. And I think this album and this track is a perfect example of that. I genuinely think that lyricists, when it comes to the music alone, lyrics aside, they're undermined simply because they have the title of lyricist and not artist, which I think is kind of a detriment to lyricists in themselves. So yeah, if you're still not into Doom, if you straight up don't like Doom, this is the last fucking album you should listen to before you give up, because it could very well change your mind. Just listen to fucking Rap Ambush, like right now, if you haven't. Now, if you still don't like Doom after that, clearly your parents did something wrong with you, but I'm here to help. The last fucking thing you should do is at least appreciate him on a production level. Listen to those Special Herb series. He dropped like fucking 10 albums, I believe, right after Doomsday, before he went on that crazy 03-04 run, and it really highlights how great of a fucking producer Doom is. I think Doom's gonna be an underrated producer for the rest of our lives, basically, because he's so highlighted as an MC, but I hope that after his passing again, more of his music is appreciated, including the Special Herb series. His production was just on another level here. I genuinely think that some of these instrumental albums can fuck with some of the best. Might not be the best, but definitely should be at least in the conversation, and I hope that people that can't even appreciate him as an MC will at least see how talented he was as a producer and give the Special Herb series a second chance if it is that they haven't already listened to it. it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on where people should start off with Doom, or pick up if it is that they left off somewhere else in their listening journey when it comes to Doom. But let me know what you think people should start off when it comes to Doom, what usually is the thing that keeps them from listening to Doom and giving him a fair chance. Please subscribe, please like, please share. Consider becoming a Patreon if you really fuck with what I'm doing and want to see this channel continue to grow and continue to move forward, and for me to continue to making videos. And I will see you all very soon. Peace.